Several of us may have gone through transformative experiences ourselves. I know I have, and it has basically been the meaning of my life to have gone through them. And it's also one of the reasons why I've devoted my scholarly work to thinking about these things. It's sort of gripped me over the last, well, to be frank, 10 years now. And I thought I would write a dissertation on it and would be thoroughly tired of the topic. But that's not how these things work. When you find your way to something like transformation, transformative experience, you are less working with the topic. The topic is working on you, I've realized, and it's not done with me yet. And so, what I have done over the last decade or so is try to understand in what ways transformation, transformative experience connects to education and more concretely, teaching in the classroom. Because one of the most important transformative experiences I had in my life was propagated through my experience with a teacher in high school, a physics teacher, who basically showed me that it's tremendously worthwhile to devote yourself to intellectual pursuits. And I didn't realize that you could get excited about something like physics or mathematics or biology or any academic and intellectual interest up to that point in my life. And I thought the only things you could really be excited by were things like sports or playing video games or hanging out with friends. And so that was a very, very impactful sort of moment for me, meeting this physics teacher of mine. And he did things in his classroom that, frankly, I would find years later were not written down in textbooks about instructional methods or about how to be an impactful or effective teacher. For some reason, we have, in education at least, missed the ways in which educators can really touch the lives of young people. And partly because it is not something that is easily written down in terms of sort of methodologies and structural processes. It has a lot to do with the personality of the teacher. It has a lot to do with the way that the teacher decides to reveal his or her passion for the subject and their own the ways that it has played a role in their life and their thinking. And so ever since I met this teacher of mine, I've sort of been fascinated by this notion that education can bring about these changes in our lives. And at the same time, there is in education a um, very active and expansive discussion of transformation. Transformation is to be found in basically every subdiscipline of educational research. And usually there's an alternative approach to teaching, a transformative approach to teaching that is recommended there. So in educational psychology, for example, there's a construct called transformative experience that is used to develop a transformative approach to science education, developed by Kevin Pugh, that has gotten a lot of traction. There's a book, Transformative Science Education, that's come out a few years ago, and is a very sort of influential model for thinking about instruction, at least in educational psychology. In social justice education, transformative pedagogy is a very common term that's used in adult education. The paradigm setting theoretical framework comes from the so-called theory of transformative learning. In the philosophy of education, there are various transformative approaches to teaching learning that have been developed. There's the so-called transformative tradition of education that Phil Jackson writes about 30 or 40 years ago. In the German educational space, which is where I am located, I'm an American, but I live and work in Germany. Um, and I'm a philosopher of education myself, I should say. But in this space, the former president of the German educational research community, Hans Christoph Koller, is a qualitative researcher and educational theorist. He advances a theory called the theory of transformative educational processes, or Bildungsprozesse in the German, which has become, again, another one of these paradigm-setting theoretical frameworks, at least in the German space. And so I had this sort of personal reason to get involved in these things, and then found, to my delight, really, that there was a massive discussion of this going on in education already. Moreover, there's been a very fascinating debate that's gone on in philosophy concerning transformative experiences, which Josh already mentioned in his talk. Transformative Experience, it was a book that came out by Lori Paul a year or two before I started writing my dissertation originally. And that debate was continued forward by someone named Agnes Callard, who wrote a book called Aspiration, which takes to task Lori Paul on several sort of logical and agential puzzles that come up in this debate. So that's kind of the background. And what I would like to make a very quick case for is the following. When you look at the various usages of the rhetoric of transformation within education, when you actually look and ask the question, what would it mean for a teacher to try to induce a transformative experience in students according to these various usages and theories of transformative education? You get very different answers. Everybody's using this language, but they mean very different things. I've found that generally speaking, people mean one of three things. They mean something like a conversion, which is to say, they hope to show students to what Charles Taylor calls a realm of fullness, a better realm. This doesn't have to be religious. And in fact, most of the time when transformation as conversion, when that rhetoric it kind of points in that direction, we're actually operating in a space that is very, very common in social justice education. There's a kind of utopian thrust. Just imagine a more just society than the one that we have today. This is the kind of transformative effect that I'm hoping to achieve, that you're kind of drawn to this utopia. You recognize the brokenness of our world, the brokenness inside of you, because you sort of have adopted racist or sexist practices, and you need to sort of cleanse yourself of your sin. um, and so in this, ironically, in this space, social justice education, critical pedagogy, you see some of this usage. So that's the first thing. The second thing that you find when people use the language of transformation in education is that they mean something like an emancipation. And so the idea here, and this we find, for example, in adult education, is that you, over time, have incorporated various social expectations for how your life should go, what you should be, gender roles, and various sort of life trajectories, vocational paths, given your socioeconomic background. You're stricken with low self-esteem, perhaps. And what the educational process should do is help you to overcome these internalized prejudices, stereotypes, and gender roles. And so it should emancipate you. Okay. So that's another form of transformation that an educator might try to initiate. A third is what I call a kind of restructuring or reconstruction. And this grows out of a lot of various educational theories and paradigms. The most obvious one is maybe John Dewey and his sort of notion of social reconstruction, the reconstruction of experience. But we also see it in philosophical hermeneutics, in the way that they describe how our experience is framed by certain concepts, and those concepts sort of structure phenomena and our purview. And we learn by disrupting these structures, basically. We reconstruct the frame of experience in order to create a new, more holistic or more synthetic or comprehensive framework. And so education here should disrupt our frameworks of experience and feeling and self-understanding. It should irritate, it should frustrate, so that we can expand our experiential frames. We also see this in various structuralist theories of education, from Piaget to Kohlberg and that sort of thing. Because again, for example, Kohlberg, we need dilemmas to show that we, for example, do not have the requisite moral resources to understand and solve the dilemma. And so we need to sort of restructure our thinking. So what's the upshot of all of this? Well, the upshot is that unfortunately, when we think about transformation in each one of these ways, we introduce various ethical problems. If we try, the most obvious one might be with the conversion paradigm. If we're trying to convert students, what exactly is the issue here? Well, the issue is that in drawing students to the supposed realm of fullness, it's not necessarily that we are sort of directing them to something that is controversial from a moral or rational standpoint. Um, that we might think that if we're operating in a very sort of liberal, egalitarian framework that is generally anti-perfectionistic. I don't operate in that framework, and actually most people don't. But so I'm not going to go into kind of refuting those issues. I think the issue with something like a conversion, even if we are convinced that what we're leading students to is truly better and truly sort of inspiring, it's just that if you do not lead students fully through that entire process, you're undermining and sort of calling into question a lot of what they appreciate about themselves and their world when you're telling them you've internalized racist prejudices or whatever. Um, and that can lead to a kind of transformative trauma, as I put it. You really need to be sure that you have enough time and you have enough prowess as an educator to really affect the full transformation to ensure that you're not left with a student that is like deeply shaken by the experience. And the same thing goes for the emancipation paradigm. The emancipation notion of transformation is that you again have internalized various things that are holding you back from your future. And it is, and generally these come from your family or your home culture or your culture in the home or your sort of cultural background. And that can turn you against these in a very important way. And Charles Taylor points out that although, of course, these are parochial in some ways, they are identity promoting. They also give rise to a certain kind of rationality. And when we are sort of disencumbered from these things, we lose a sense of agency and intentionality and identity. And so there again, the stakes are high. And ethically speaking, we need to really be careful if we're trying to do this in the classroom. And then the final one, reconstruction. There is some ethical issues as to the extent to which our jobs as educators is to disrupt, irritate, frustrate, and sort of unsettle students. And what I've tried to make a case for in some of my writings is that the most promising from an ethical standpoint way of thinking about transformative experiences, the kinds at least that we can initiate in the classroom, are at root aspirational processes. And an aspirational process is a special kind of transformation in which we have made contact with some new and valuable idea, way of life, way of thinking, and we are drawn to the value of that thing in a really special way. It's special because we do not understand that value originally, and the transformative process is getting closer to this value. So many of us have hobbies that are aspirational in this nature. Maybe some of you enjoy cooking or enjoy photography. I myself love baking bread. And each one of these things, they captivate us because we recognize in them, as particularly in the initial phases, some kind of special value that we want to get to know better. We want to get closer to that. And that motivates us to start doing the strange things that you do when you want to become a photographer. You start carrying around spending hours researching cameras, and then you take it out and your friends are trying to have a conversation, and then suddenly you see the light and the shadows are very interesting over in the corner of that room, and so you leave the conversation in the middle of it and you take a picture. um, you start to do things that are odd, that are different. And what you're doing is you are basically initiating into the practice of photography, slowly but surely. And the case I've made over the years, and that I sort of want to suggest to the conversation, is that if we're thinking about the ways that we can change young people's lives for the better, if we're thinking about the ways that teachers can have a transformative impact on the people that are sitting in their classrooms, or the way that we can mentor the young people that we engage with in our own classrooms or in various other consulting roles, um, I think it is best, most promising, most hopeful to think about what we're doing as introducing students to values, ideals that they have perhaps never appreciated before, and to show them that it is worthwhile to strive for them. And we show them that by sort of living that experience out, or that sense of value out with our own example. Um, if we teach philosophy, if we teach theology, in a sense, our task is to show that studying this has this tremendous impact to enrich and expand our experience. And while we love getting into the nitty-gritty and talking about the theories and the concepts, how it all hangs together, the history of the discipline, what the aspirational theory really encourages is that we can begin to touch students' lives if we dare to sort of open up a little bit and try to show our passion for the subject and show how it has changed our own lives and how we are better for it. Our lives are richer. Our experience is just more interesting. We're more capable of awe and wonder and appreciation of beauty as a result of becoming a philosopher, a theologian, a biologist, or whatever it might be. That not only aspiration for me not only solves a problem, an ethical problem in the way we think about transformative education, it touches on, I think, what the best teachers do in their classrooms. They are just exemplars of their disciplines and of the value of their disciplines, and how darn exciting it is to learn math or social studies or English literature. And so I think I will just leave it there. I hope I've been personally just really fascinated by this discussion so far. And um, what I just want to say kind of in closing is that I think what I've learned is that there are also sort of additional genres of conversion and transformation out there. And I think it is for educational purposes really, really important to keep in mind what each of these things what each of these genres make possible in our lives. And frankly, to have the courage to share it with young people, because I think in some ways, the scary thing about postmodernity is for all of its talk about social transformation and digitalization and digital culture, there is a kind of deep conformism and just distraction by technology that makes it almost seems every year more difficult to imagine these life-changing experiences. And I think for those of us who have had them, or who at least understand them to a certain extent, um, we have a kind of duty to talk about them with young people and say that it's possible for them. So thanks for listening.